Well, front and center to these 100 days is Congressman Pete Sessions, who is the co-chair of the DOJ caucus and is on the House Oversight Committee, and he joins us live from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Let me just ask you point blank, respond to those numbers, the latest survey and polling data from CNN showing that the majority of Americans disapprove of how the president is handling a number of issues, first and foremost, the economy.
Well, first of all, let me say this. I think the American people do not clearly understand where the president's headed, and that's where the president needs to be very clear and succinct about saying that the reason why we're doing this is more than just bringing back jobs to the United States of America. It's actually making sure that he manages across all realms of our economy, whether it's energy, whether it is crime, or whether it is, once again, as tariffs, that he is attempting to balance the United States to where it becomes this golden age that he has spoken about. Now, it's taken a little bit longer. We have obviously competition from China and around the globe on tariffs, and so the president needs to, and I think he understands this, get more quickly to the point of where the United States is going to be. It is uncertainty that is causing this. It is in between the highs and the lows, where are we going to end up? And that's where members of Congress have to know we have a role to play, because our votes will determine how big government spending is. It is government spending that creates inflation also in this equation.
Do you understand where the president is going with these policies?
Well, I think I do. And where he is going to head is that he has already indicated, and the secretary's indicated, they want to get to a lack of tariffs or lower tariffs, but he will correspondingly apply to any country the same tariffs that they have on us. And then China is that big problem, and he is going to hold the Chinese until they consent to not only intellectual property, rule of law, but how they treat people in the marketplace. He's going to keep that on tariff on China. And so it means that many of the products that we've gotten used to receiving, yes, at a discount, at a lower price from China, and those are going to rise. But we cannot allow China, and he will not allow China to continue what they've been doing.
Is that a gamble you're willing to take as Republicans go into the midterms in less than 2 years' time right now, that at the expense of evening things out, leaving the playing field, as you describe it, with China, that Americans should withstand paying more at the grocery store, concerned about empty shelves, at department stores, concerned about their own jobs and their livelihoods? Is that something you're willing to run on?
Well, I want to be plain about this, that the China content, I do believe, is fair. Where it deals with Mexico, where it deals with Canada, our friends in the EU, there is an understanding that we've got to quickly resolve that. I represent Dell Technologies. Dell Technologies wants to be in marketplaces around the world, not only where they have the best product, but also the best price. But if someone withholds because of their own tariffs on us, then the president should correspondingly do the same to that country. But it's quickly got to be something that's solved, and I think it has taken a little bit longer.
So much of this is based around trust, as you know, and just looking at the polling data on inflation, approval is down 9 percentage points to 35%. On tariffs themselves, down 4%, also at 35%. 6 in 10 Americans say that Trump's policies have increased the cost of living in their community. And when we heard from the Treasury Secretary speak earlier today, what really caught my attention was him saying that he doesn't anticipate supply chain shocks. We have all reported on, and you're well aware of what the CEOs of some of the largest retailers warned President Trump of just a few weeks ago in the Oval Office, from Walmart, from Home Depot, from Target, saying that if this isn't resolved soon, we could see higher prices, empty store shelves, and disruptions to supply chains within a matter of weeks. So who should we believe here?
Well, we should believe that that is occurring, and the longer that this is hanging out the way it is a problem. It's a problem to airlines, it's a problem to hotels, it's a problem to small business that is waiting for these tariffs to standardize themselves. But no, I'm not saying that I don't get it. I do get it, and timing is something that is always important. As you've heard me say a number of times, I would not have gone the direction the president has gone. I do not believe in higher tariffs. I do not believe in things that will cause inflation and prices to rise. But with that said, the United States has a problem with China. We have a problem with China that we have to own up to and understand. And I think that's where the president needs to land. He needs to do, I think, a better job of explaining to the American people what this will mean. And if we do not fight this and with an understanding, it has little to do with fans and maybe cheaper products that the American people would want, but it has a lot to do with the intellectual property, the way we do business, the things that China signed up for 20 years ago when they got most favored nation status. And those are the things that are on board that have to be decided in 2025.
We should note that the tariffs that President Trump imposed on China during his last term were actually held by President Biden as well and strengthened to some degree, but they were more tailored, not what we're seeing right now across the board. And as you also note, every other trading partner, most of the trading partners we have around the world, also feeling the ramifications of these tariffs. Before you go, I do want to ask you about your role as co-chair of the DOGE caucus. The last time we had you on, you said that there had been some missteps with this project as well. Elon Musk has stated that his time advising the president is coming to an end soon. He's going to return to the private sector and running his companies. In your first 3 months here, as this co-chair of the DOGE caucus, can you give us any specific examples of what it's done to improve the lives and save money of your constituents?
Yes, I can. First of all, this administration is the first time we've had visibility into not only the spending habits of a government that stayed at home, but the spending habits of trillions of dollars that were added to the debt. And we need to be able to peg that, to understand where did all this money come from and go. As you know, the Fed took out, in essence, a loan for several $trillion. Is that money being held by them? Are people paying that back? Did that go into loans, or is that something that was spent? We believe that there are assets and resources that we've got to account for, and that's what DOGE is attempting to do. Now, on the side of members of Congress having insight, I am not happy with our insight, with our knowledge, to where we were able to then amplify the spending, who had it, where did it go, and the ability to translate that to the American people. And we have been very open with the White House to say we need more visibility, we need to work together, and we appreciate what you're doing.
So no tangible then results to show your constituents yet?
I don't think that that's it. I think it's, can we offer full visibility to understand what is the difference between discretionary and mandatory spending? You see, we do not, for mandatory spending, we don't budget for that. And I think the huge part of this process was done under mandatory spending as opposed to discretionary, which we would then be responsible for and know what to cut.
Congressman Pete Sessions from my home state of Texas, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate you joining us.